While visiting Edinburgh on a spring holiday, a young woman posed beside a lamppost with her father, hoping to capture a sweet memory of their trip. But later that evening, as she looked closer at the photo, she spotted something strange in the background, something blurred, something familiar. Within hours, that single detail would unravel everything she thought she knew about her life, her family, and herself. The cobbled streets of Edinburgh glistened under the golden light of the late afternoon sun. Tourists milled about Royal Mile, pausing to photograph the ancient stone buildings and vibrant street performers. Among them, Clara Jennings, 19, moved with wide auburn hair shimmered in the sun, tied back in a simple ponytail. Her long auburn hair shimmered in the sun, tied back in a simple ponytail, her denim jacket thrown casually over her shoulder. "This place is like a living fairy tale," she murmured, glancing up at the spires of St. Giles Cathedral. Victor chuckled beside her, adjusting his glasses. "I told you Scotland had charm. It's not all just rain and bagpipes." Clara smiled. They had saved for 2 years for this trip, her high school graduation gift delayed by part-time jobs and rent, but now they were finally here, walking side by side like any normal American family on a European photographer. Stationed near a lamppost, his vintage-style camera mounted on a wooden tripod. "Want a keepsake? Something better than a selfie?" Clara lit up. "Are you kidding? Absolutely." They approached the photographer, who welcomed them with a thick accent and a friendly smile. "Step right here. The castle peeking from the background gives the best contrast." Father and daughter, yes. Victor wrapped an arm around Clara, pulling her close. She leaned into him with a laugh, the laughter captured just as the shutter clicked. A soft whirring sound followed, and within seconds the man handed them a glossy print. Clara clutched it like treasure. "This is perfect," she said. "Mind if I take a picture of it for Instagram?" Victor nodded and handed it over, then turned toward a nearby bench to check his phone. Clara walked a few paces away, found a patch of soft light, and lifted her phone. As she framed the photo, adjusting the brightness and contrast for the best post, something odd caught her eye. She zoomed in. Behind her and Victor, just to the left of the lamppost, was a weathered green pole. On it, partially peeling and sun-bleached, was a missing flyer. Her thumb paused mid-mitt. She squinted closer. A child's face stared out from the black-and-white image, a girl no older than 3, with big round eyes, a small chin, and thick curly hair. The resemblance to her childhood photos was unsettling. Her stomach fluttered, but then her gaze drifted slightly rightward, to the figure of a woman, barely distinguishable in the background, standing perfectly still. She wasn't smiling, she wasn't watching the photographer, she was looking directly at Clara. Something in that gaze, haunted, almost knowing, sent a jolt through her chest. Clara blinked, trying to shrug it off, but her fingers trembled slightly as she cropped the image. "Dad," she called over her shoulder, "did you see that woman behind us in the photo?" Victor looked up. "What woman?" She showed him the picture. His eyes barely scanned it before he reached out. "Let me see." He stared at the image a second too long, then smoothly he slipped the photo into the inside pocket of his jacket. "It's just a random stranger. Don't let it spook you. Come on, we should get back to the hotel before dinner." Clara frowned. "Can I keep the print?" Victor smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'll take good care of it. You've got the digital one anyway, right?" She nodded hesitantly, watching him a moment longer. Something about his tone felt off, but she told herself she was imagining it. She always overthought things. That's what Victor liked to tease her about. As they walked back down Royal Mile, the chatter of street musicians and tourists swelled around them. Clara trailed behind slightly, glancing back at the lamppost as they passed it again. The flyer was still there. She stopped. Slowly, she stepped closer, ignoring the flow of pedestrians. The girl's name read Amelia Woodward, missing since 2006. She would have been just over a year old. Her hand shook slightly as she snapped a photo of the flyer with her phone. "Clara!" Victor's voice called sharply. She jumped. "Coming," she shouted back, forcing her legs to move. But her mind wouldn't quiet. Her thoughts spiraled. She opened her photo gallery and scrolled to the oldest pictures of herself. But there weren't any before age 4. She'd always thought that was normal. Now she wasn't so sure. That night, The dim light of their rented Edinburgh apartment flickered softly as Clara lay on the edge of her bed, the covers bunched around her waist, her phone glowing against her pale face. Her thoughts were consumed by the flyer and the strange woman's gaze. Something wasn't right. She could feel it under her skin like a buzzing current, subtle but impossible to ignore. Victor was in the living room watching some British crime series with the volume turned low, and Elaine, her mother, had just stepped out for a quick walk after dinner. Clara stood up quietly, tiptoed into the hallway, and peeked around the corner. Victor's silhouette was slouched on the couch, his attention focused on the screen. She turned back toward the couch rack near the door. There, hanging neatly among the scarves and jackets, was Victor's navy blue vest, the same one he'd worn during their outing. She waited, counting each second, her pulse quickening. The moment the show's theme song began playing loudly enough to cover faint noises, Clara reached into the pocket of Victor's vest with careful fingers. Her breath caught when her hand touched the thick, glossy edge of the photo paper. He hadn't thrown it away. He'd lied. Her grip tightened as she pulled out the image and tucked it quickly under her own sweater. She returned to her room, heart pounding in her chest. Sitting cross-legged on her bed, she held the print under the bedside lamp. There it was again, her smile. Victor's arm wrapped around her shoulders, the beautiful backdrop of Edinburgh behind them, and the flyer in the corner with the face of Amelia Woodward, and that woman in the background staring. Only this time, Clara noticed something else. The date printed in tiny letters on the flyer, missing since March 2006. Her birthday, as she'd been told all her life, was February 2005, which meant Amelia would have been around 1 year old when she disappeared. The timeline matched. Clara's stomach turned. She turned to her laptop and opened a private browser. Her fingers flew across the keys. Amelia Woodward missing child, Edinburgh 2006. Dozens of links popped up. Old news articles, blogs, online forums, a page on a UK missing children registry. Clara clicked through the pages one by one. Amelia had vanished during a park picnic with her parents in Holyrood Park. No witnesses, no surveillance, just a blanket left behind and a single missing shoe. Clara stared at the images, the grainy baby photo used in the original reports, her own curls, the same cheek dimples, the slant of the eyes. She could have been that child. She might have been. Her mind raced. Could it really be a coincidence? The name had stirred something in her chest. She clicked away from the registry and opened a government record request site in the U.S. She typed in her own full name, Clara Ann Jennings. Birth date, February 3, 2005. State of birth, Oregon. A spinning icon appeared. After a few seconds, the result flashed. No matching birth record found. She blinked. That had to be a mistake. She tried again, entering different counties, then tried California, where she remembered attending kindergarten, then Idaho, where they'd once lived for a year, still nothing. Her hands grew clammy. She leaned back, staring at the screen, her mind grappling with the impossible. No birth record? How could that be? Her parents had always been organized, careful. Victor had been a math teacher, Elaine a librarian. They filed taxes, took family photos, went to PTA meetings. How could someone fake all of that? And why would they? Unless her breath hitched, they weren't really her parents. That thought hit like a slap. She stood up and began pacing, suddenly cold despite the warm room. She opened her suitcase, dug through the bottom layer, and found a small velvet box with old photos Elaine had once given her. She flipped through them, school portraits, Halloween costumes, beach vacations, but none before the age of 4. Not even a single baby photo. "That just when we got our first digital camera," Elaine had said once. Clara hadn't thought anything of it then. Now it felt like a lie. She returned to her laptop, pulled up a Reddit thread about unsolved child abduction cases, and scrolled. Someone had posted a thread 2 years ago. Does anyone remember the Amelia Woodward case? Baby taken from park in Edinburgh, parents never stopped looking. The top comment read, "Mother still posts flyers. Some say she travels during spring to put up fresh ones." Heartbreaking. Clara stared at that comment, remembering the woman in the photo, standing behind her and Victor. She wasn't just a stranger. She had been watching her intensely, not like a tourist. Maybe even following them. Clara closed her eyes. What if that woman had known who Clara was before Clara herself did? The idea shook her. She needed answers. But how could she bring this up to Victor without raising alarms? She couldn't risk tipping him off, not yet. She needed more proof. Proof she was really Amelia. Proof they had taken her. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from Victor. "You okay, sweetheart? You've been in your room a while." Her fingers hovered over the screen. She forced her tone to stay casual. "Yeah, just super tired. Gonna crash early." She waited. His reply came, "All right. Sleep well. Love you." She didn't answer. Instead, she lay back down, heart thudding in her chest, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. Every image she'd ever stored of her childhood, every bedtime story, every warm family Christmas, felt suddenly fragile, like paper held too close to flame. Clara didn't sleep that night. She spent the hours researching every detail of the Woodward family, reading interviews from the grieving mother, studying more photos. She found an old video from 2010, Nessa Woodward speaking at a memorial for missing children. Her voice trembled, her hands clutched a small stuffed bear, the same one visible in Amelia's baby photo. Clara watched the video again and again. The woman had the same eyes, the same gentle smile, that same haunted gaze. Clara's fingers trembled as she reached for her own phone and opened the selfie camera. For the first time in her life, she wondered who she was really looking at. And then her screen froze. Her phone screen, mid-reflection, cut to black. Low battery. Clara stared at the dark screen, and somewhere beyond the walls of their Airbnb, in a small Edinburgh apartment just a few streets away, a woman was staring at her own screen too, watching a blurry snapshot of Clara taken just hours earlier. Watching, waiting. The following morning, Clara moved with the stiffness of a sleepless night, her eyes rimmed with fatigue, her mind spinning with unanswered questions. Victor and Elaine had already left for their planned walking tour of the Castle District, leaving her alone in the Airbnb flat tucked inside a weathered tenement just off Calfcath. She stood in the silence of the apartment, letting the warm light filter through the sheer curtains, casting ghostly patterns on the wooden floor. The scent of old books and dust lingered faintly, mixing with the metallic chill of the overcast Scottish day. Clara wandered into the spare bedroom, the one Victor claimed was too drafty to sleep in, and pushed open the antique wardrobe door. Nothing unusual, coats, a few empty hangers, a folded blanket. Still something felt off. She dropped to her knees and examined the floor, her fingers tracing the edges of a loose floorboard hidden beneath the bed frame. With a firm tug, the wood lifted with a dull creak, revealing a shallow cavity. Nestled within was a small, dust-covered laptop bag. Heart racing, Clara pulled it out, unzipped it, and discovered an old external hard drive, heavy, scuffed, and labeled with a worn sticker that read, Archive 6A. She swallowed hard and rushed back to her room, plugging the drive into her own laptop with trembling hands. The folders loaded slowly, each labeled cryptically with numbers and initials, B23_MK, J17_MA, 2_PW. She clicked the first one, expecting photos of travel or work, but what she saw turned her blood cold. Dozens of images filled the screen. Children, smiling, laughing, some caught mid-motion on playgrounds or sidewalks, each image stamped with GPS coordinates, dates, and short notes. Clara clicked through rapidly, her fingers beginning to shake. A boy in a grocery aisle, stamp-stamped 6 years ago in Nebraska. A girl standing outside a Texas library. Another child on a swing in Kansas City. Names weren't included, just abbreviations, ages, and sometimes the note, monitor only or pending. None of it made sense. Until she opened the folder named Aoua Scarab, her heart stopped. The first photo was a scanned image of a toddler in a sun hat, sitting on a red blanket sucking her thumb. The second, a zoomed-out version showing Hollerowede Park in the background. The third, taken seconds later, showed an older woman looking away and a man's hand entering the frame, just behind the child. Clara stared at the little girl, at her round face, her unruly curls. There was no question. It was her. She scrolled further and found a video file titled Pickup_Final. Her hands trembled as she clicked play. The screen flickered, then steadied. It showed a spring afternoon. Children played near a stone wall. A blanket was laid out with picnic food. A young couple, their backs to the camera, laughed as they talked to an older man. In the background, a figure moved deliberately across the field. He wore sunglasses and carried a worn duffel. He approached the toddler, who sat a short distance from the group, her stuffed rabbit beside her. The figure crouched, said something, and the girl turned. He lifted her easily, smoothly, wrapping her in a light blanket, and walked away toward the trees. No one noticed. Clara covered her mouth with her hand. Her breath came in short gasps. The figure in the video wore sunglasses, but as he turned, the frame caught a partial profile. Jawline, nose, chin, it was unmistakable. Victor. She hit pause and stared at the frozen frame, unable to look away. Her entire body felt disconnected, like she was floating in a memory she'd never had. The picnic, the man, the blanket, all of it real, all of it stolen. She dug deeper into the folder. Notes, memos, scanned passports. Among the documents was a flight itinerary from Edinburgh to New Jersey, dated March 8, 2006, just 3 days after the date on the missing flyer. The names listed were Victor Jennings and Elaine Jennings. Attached was a scanned photo of a sleeping toddler in an airline bassinet, her cheeks flushed, her small hand gripping a blue bunny. Clara fell back onto the mattress, the air knocked from her lungs. They had taken her. Not adopted, not rescued, taken. Her mind reeled through every bedtime story, every scraped knee, every time Victor had kissed her forehead or Elaine had packed her lunch. Had any of it been real? She tried to recall her earliest memory, anything before preschool, but it was a fog, half-formed shadows and voices, none of them distinct. She returned to the video and hit play again, watching the moment over and over, searching for a sign she'd been scared, that she'd resisted. But she hadn't. She'd gone with him, quietly, willingly, because she was too young to know better, because he probably smiled and told her he had ice cream or a new toy. She shut the laptop and curled in on herself, wrapping her arms around her knees. The silence of the apartment was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the wooden beams and the hum of a car passing outside. From somewhere far off, bells chimed, the sound echoing through the narrow streets of Edinburgh. She had to confront them. She had to ask Victor why. She had to ask Elaine how they could pretend for 18 years. But not yet. First, she needed proof. Not just memories, not just photos. Something irrefutable. DNA. Birth records. Someone who remembered her. Someone who remembered Amelia. She stood up shakily, pushed the laptop back into its case, and re-hid the hard drive beneath the floorboards. She needed time. She needed to be smart, because now, if they found out what she knew, she wasn't sure what they would do. And just as she turned to leave the room, her phone vibrated. A message from Victor lit up the screen. Reception reservations tonight. We're celebrating family. Clara stared at the text. Her fingers hovered above the screen. Her reflection stared back at her from the glassy black glass. Her face, Amelia's face, not yet sure which name truly belonged to her. That night, as the darkness settled over Edinburgh like a thick, silent curtain, Clara lay awake once more, the room cold despite the extra blanket wrapped around her legs. The glow of her phone screen had faded endlessly, her pulse still uneasy after discovering the contents of the hidden hard drive. The video had etched itself into her memory, each frame as vivid as a fresh wound. She kept seeing that little girl, herself, being lifted off the grass and carried away, a soft blanket wrapping her like a secret. The clock ticked past midnight. The city outside was quiet, save for the occasional rumble of a taxi or the rustle of wind through old shutters. From the other side of the apartment came a muffled thump, soft but distinctive. Clara sat up, instinctively alert. She crept toward the door and opened it just enough to peer into the hallway. A faint light spilled from the living room. She moved quietly, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. As she approached, she heard movement, drawers opening, footsteps pacing, then a whisper. "Millie? Millie, where did you go?" Clara froze. Her stomach turned ice. The voice was Elaine, she mouthed, heart thundering. She leaned closer. Elaine stood near the kitchen counter, her hair disheveled, her voice barely tied, her fingers trembling as she whispered again, her voice cracking. "It's cold. You'll catch a chill." Claire stepped forward, barely able to breathe. "Mom?" she said softly. Elaine jerked around. Her eyes widened, darting wildly for a moment before focusing. "Clara," she breathed, like waking from a dream. "What are you doing up?" Clara took a slow step forward. "You called me Millie." Elaine's lips parted, no sound coming out. You said that name twice." Elaine shook her head, backing toward the counter. No, sweetheart, you must have misheard." "Millie," Claire repeated, her voice trembling now. "Would you call me that?" "It was just a slip," Elaine said, too quickly. I used to know a girl named Millie, long ago. It's late. You should go to bed." "Don't lie to me," Clara snapped, harsher than she intended. "Please, I just want to know the truth." Elaine stared at her for a long moment, her eyes glistening under the kitchen light. Her hand moved to her chest, then slowly to the drawer beside her, pulling it open with a slow creak. Clara instinctively stiffened, but Elaine only pulled out a small amber bottle and opened it with trembling fingers. "I can't do this without help," she whispered, tapping 2 white pills into her palm. She swallowed them dry, her throat working slowly. Clara watched, emotions churning. Rage, sorrow, confusion. "Tell me who Millie is," she said, softer now. "Or was." Elaine slumped into a chair, her shoulders caving in. "Millie was what I used to call you," she said at last, her voice almost inaudible. "Back when you were small, before you knew your name, was Clara. You used to laugh every time I said it." "So it was me," Clara said, voice tightening. "It was my name." Elaine's hands clutched the robe tighter around her. "It wasn't your real name, just something I started using before Victor settled on Clara." "Why?" Clara asked. "Why not use my real name from the start? Why change everything?" Elaine shook her head, her eyes distant. He said it was safer that way. That the name had to go that way, that the name had to go that way, that we couldn't leave a single trace. Clara felt her knees weaken and leaned against the kitchen island. "You knew. You've always known." "I didn't want to," Elaine said quickly, her voice suddenly pleading. "I didn't ask for it. I didn't plan it. He told me it was the only way, that we were rescuing you from bad people, that they didn't deserve you." Clara stared at her. "Rescuing me? I had parents, real parents, a life." "Victor said they didn't care," Elaine insisted. "Was that you let you wander too far? That no one even noticed when he picked you up?" "I didn't believe him at first. I was angry. I said we had to go back. But then you smiled at me. You called me Mama by accident one day, and She broke off, wiping her eyes. "I convinced myself we'd done the right thing, that maybe you were meant to be ours." Clara's voice was barely above a whisper. "How could you live with that? For 18 years?" Elaine looked away. "Because I loved you. I still do. I know it's not enough. I know love doesn't erase what we did, but I woke up every day trying to make sure you felt safe, happy, protected." "You lied to me every day," Clara said, voice shaking. "That's not protection. I know." Clara stepped back, her hand trembling at her side. "Why now? Why are you calling me by that name again?" Elaine looked up, her eyes haunted. "Because you've changed. You're pulling away. I can feel it. Victor feels it too. He watches your every move, Clara. He doesn't trust easily, not even me. He knows something's wrong." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "If he thinks you've figured it out, he'll do something. He's never been good at letting go." "What do you mean?" Clara asked. Elaine hesitated, then whispered, "Victor will never let you leave. Not now. Not when he's afraid of losing you." Clara's blood ran cold. "What is he capable of?" Elaine's face crumpled. "You don't want to know. Just be careful. Please, don't push him too far." Clara stood frozen, her mind racing. Elaine looked exhausted, broken, her hands trembling as the sedatives began to dull her movements. Clara wanted to scream, to demand more answers, but the fear in Elaine's voice, raw, unfiltered, silenced her. She turned slowly, walking back down the hallway in the dark, the name Millie echoing in her ears. As she reached her room and closed the door behind her, she heard Elaine whisper something else, a broken confession barely audible above the creaking walls, but it was enough to stop Clara's heart for a moment. "Said, if you ever found out, he'd rather lose everything than let you go." Clara barely slept after Elaine's midnight confession. Her body curled under the blankets while her mind replayed every syllable, every tremble in Elaine's voice, every terrified glance she had cast down the hallway. The word Millie still echoed inside her like a whisper from a dream she had once forgotten but could now never ignore. As the early rays of sunlight filtered through the Edinburgh haze, Clara slipped out of bed and reached for her phone. A new email notification caught her eye. Your digital photo is ready, sent by the street photographer they had met near the Royal Mile. She opened it, heart quickening. The high-resolution file loaded slowly, and for a brief moment the image looked ordinary. She and Victor, smiling with Tower Bridge rising in the backdrop, the composition artfully framed, but Clara zoomed in immediately, focusing on the background near the lamppost. Her fingers stilled. The flyer was there again, albeit more pixelated than she remembered. But something else struck her this time. The figure of the woman, the same eerie presence behind them, appeared more faded, almost unnaturally so, as if someone had deliberately blurred her out. Clara leaned closer, tapping and adjusting the contrast, increasing sharpness, but the more she enhanced, the more distorted the figure became. It wasn't normal camera blur, someone had altered the image. She opened the file's metadata. Most casual users wouldn't know to look there, but Clara had spent enough time editing photos for her social media to know what to expect: shutter speed, aperture, location. Except this time, several fields were empty. The software used to capture the image was listed as unknown, and under Edit History, a strange note appeared: Face Zone Mask, layer applied. Clara's pulse surged. Someone had edited the image post-capture. Why? And why only that woman's face? She scrolled to the contact number at the bottom of the photographer's email and called immediately. A young voice answered. Yes, this is Leo. You were the American girl from yesterday, right? Yeah, Clara, she replied quickly. Hey, listen, did you edit the photo you emailed me? Edit? Leo sounded confused. No, that's straight from the booth. It applies some automatic enhancements for lighting, but I don't touch anything manually. Can you double-check? There's a person in the background that looks blurry, only her. It's like someone tried to erase her. Weird, Leo murmured. That shouldn't happen. I can check the base file on my end, but the booth stores backups on a memory card. I'll take a look this afternoon and let you know. Clara thanked him and hung up, but she couldn't wait for him to check. She needed help now. She scrolled through her contact list and found a familiar name: Dylan Ramos, her freshman year dorm mate, now studying cybersecurity at NYU. Clara hadn't spoken to him in months, but he had once fixed her hacked Instagram in minutes and insisted she keep him in her emergency contacts for when the world inevitably becomes one giant data leak. She sent him the file with a simple message: Need serious help. Can you tell if this photo was altered? And can you undo it? It took only 3 minutes for the typing dots to appear. Dylan, who? Yeah, this file's been tampered with. Someone applied a facial mask layer over a subject in the background. Want me to isolate and reverse it? Clara, please, as fast as you can. It's important. She paced the room, unable to sit still. Her stomach coiled with anticipation and dread. She stared at the photo again, now displayed on her laptop, and felt the strangest sense of déjà vu. Not from the image itself, but from the feeling of being watched, of someone just at the edge of her vision. The woman in the background had been looking at her, directly at her, not at the scenery or the photographer. Claire remembered the look, the deep, aching recognition in that woman's eyes. Her phone buzzed. Dylan, okay, I've stripped the mask and rebuilt the facial data from surrounding pixels and color curves. Sending enhanced version now. A second later, an image appeared in her inbox. Clara opened it, her breath catching in her throat. The woman's face had been restored, not perfectly, but clearly enough. Dark hair, streaked with gray, pale, slightly freckled skin, eyes soft, mournful, and hauntingly familiar. Clara gasped. She grabbed her other phone, opened the video she had found in the hidden hard drive, and froze the frame that showed Amelia's biological mother standing beside the picnic blanket. Then she held it up next to the newly restored photo. It was the same woman. Clara blinked rapidly, her vision swimming. The same expression, the same jawline, She checked the metadata Dylan had recovered. It had a GPS coordinate. She dropped it into a map app. The woman had been standing just 30 feet behind them when the photo was taken. Clara's hands shook. The woman hadn't just been watching, she had been following them. No, not them, her. Claire opened her browser again, now more focused than ever, and typed, Nessa Woodward, 2025, UK. Dozens of results appeared, interviews, support groups, podcasts about unsolved disappearances. Nessa had never stopped searching. One article described how she returned to Edinburgh every spring to renew posters and visit the last place Amelia had been seen. Clara clicked on a photo from the article. Nessa stood beside a wall plastered with fading, missing flyers. Her hands clutched a laminated image of a toddler, and her eyes held the same weariness Clara had now seen in every version of her. She scrolled further until she found a full name, an email address linked to a volunteer search group, and a short bio. Nessa Woodward, mother of Amelia Woodward, missing since March 2006. Clara hovered over the email field. Her fingers hesitated. What would she even say? Hi, I might be your daughter? She couldn't just drop a bombshell in an inbox. She needed proof, solid, undeniable proof. She needed DNA. And she needed to be absolutely sure, because once she opened that door, it would never close again. Just then, another message from Dylan appeared. Hey, is everything okay? That woman looked like she knew you. Was she following you? Claire stared at his words, the cursor blinking beneath the chat box. She typed, then deleted. Typed again. Finally, she wrote, I think she's my mother. Dylan responded instantly. Holy shit. Clara didn't reply. Instead, she shut her laptop slowly, the room suddenly unbearably quiet. Outside, the gray sky over Edinburgh rumbled with distant thunder. She turned toward the living room where Victor was laughing at something on TV. Her throat clenched. She knew now that Nessa Woodward hadn't given up. She had been right there just beyond the frame, trying to reach through time and lies to touch the daughter stolen from her. The following afternoon, Clara couldn't stay in the apartment any longer. Her skin itched with restlessness, her chest too tight with thoughts she could no longer contain. Every glance from Victor felt loaded, every silence from Elaine unbearable. She told them she needed fresh air, maybe a walk down the Royal Mile alone, and though Victor seemed hesitant, he didn't object. Clara slipped her phone into her coat pocket, zipped it all the way up, and stepped into the chill of the Edinburgh street. The sky was overcast, casting everything in muted gray, but she welcomed the gloom. It matched the storm brewing inside her. She retraced her steps toward the lamppost where the photo had been taken, where the flyer had clung loosely to the metal like a silent cry no one truly heard. As she walked past the stone buildings and centuries-old alleyways, she tried to rehearse what she might say to Nessa when the time came, if the time came. But her thoughts spiraled again and again, always returning to the same loop of disbelief, fury, and a flicker of longing she didn't yet know how to handle. At the base of the lamppost, a new copy of the flyer had been pinned, cleaner, laminated, its corners crisp. Clara stopped and stared, tracing the black and white face once more, her own face frozen in time. A man sat nearby on a weather-beaten bench, wrapped in an army surplus coat, his hands tucked into fingerless gloves. He looked like part of the scenery, as if he'd always been there, invisible to passers-by. But as Clara stepped back, something about her changed gray eyebrows. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered. 18 years, and there you are. Clara turned slowly. Excuse me. He stood, his knees popping audibly, and approached with a cautious reverence, as if approaching a ghost. I know that face, he said, pointing to the flyer, then to her. You're her, the girl from the park? The one they took? Her breath caught. What do you mean? Holy Rude, he said simply, the name like a stone dropping into a still pond. Spring 2006. It was a Sunday. I remember 'cause they were serving lamb stew at the shelter that day, and I skipped it to sit on the bench near the field. I always liked watching the families. Happy noise, you know? He coughed once, dry and scratchy. You were with your mummy-dad, real gentle-looking folks. You were chasing a wind-up bunny toy across the grass. Then this American couple showed up. Fancy camera, big smiles. The man kept circling, looking around like he was counting people. Clara's knees went weak. She steadied herself against the pole. What happened? He waited until the parents turned away, the old man said. The lady, she faked a spill, dropped her drink right near them, made a fuss. While they helped her up, the man, he swooped right in, picked you up like it was nothing, wrapped you in a pink blanket, walked off cool as rain. I remember thinking, must be their nanny, but then I saw the woman look up. Her eyes, he paused, his voice catching. I ain't never seen that kind of scream before, not from the mouth. Claire swallowed hard. Did you tell anyone? Course I did. Went to the police, gave a full statement, described them best I could, said they were American. But no cameras caught it, no plates. They vanished, like smoke. His eyes narrowed as he looked at her again. And now you're standing here, right here. I'd know those eyes anywhere. Clara's heart thundered. Are you sure? About them being American? About their faces? Absolutely, the man nodded. The guy had a voice like a late-night DJ, real smooth, deep. Called the woman Elaine, I think, and she called him Vic or something, close to that. Clara's breath hitched. The world seemed to tilt. She felt the cold sweep into her lungs like ice water. That's them, she whispered. That's what they go by now, Victor and Elaine Jennings. The old man's face hardened. Then you've been living a lie, child. A sweet one, maybe, but a lie all the same. Clara turned away, her vision blurring hay. She felt the wind whip through her hair, the sound of traffic distant and hollow. Have to go, she murmured. Please, wait, the man said, placing a hand gently on her arm. I don't know what you're going to do next, but whatever it is, don't do it alone. They lied, but you're real. You remember that? She nodded mutely and backed away, her limbs moving on instinct. She didn't know how long she walked after that, through narrow closes past cathedral walls, over bridges that spanned time itself. Her body carried her forward, but her mind reeled. Someone else had seen it. Someone else had watched it happen. It wasn't just on video. It wasn't just in files and flyers and gut feelings. A witness had seen her be stolen, and that witness had recognized her, even now, even after 18 years. She was real. Amelia was real. Claire's entire identity trembled beneath her skin. She could still hear Elaine's voice from the night before, whispering Victor would never let her go, and now she knew why. Because if he did, if she left, the truth would come out. The law would come crashing down, and she wasn't sure if he feared losing her or simply feared getting caught. Clara stormed back into the apartment just before dusk, her hair damp from the drizzle, her boots muddy from the winding alleyways she'd wandered through aimlessly after her encounter with the old man. Her body moved on autopilot, but her mind was fire. The door shut behind her with a sharp slam, the sound echoing through the apartment like a gunshot. Victor looked up from the dining table, a cup of tea in hand, his brow instantly furrowed. "Where have you been?" he asked, voice tight. "You didn't answer your phone." "I was out," Claire replied flatly, brushing past him, thinking. He stood. "Out where? Why do you care?" she shot back. "You never asked that before." Victor's jaw clenched. "Excuse me?" Claire turned to face him fully, her voice rising. "I went back to the lamppost. I saw the flyer again. I talked to someone who remembers what you did, who saw it happen. I know everything now, Victor, or should I call you by another name?" Silence fell like a hammer. Victor's eyes narrowed. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know enough," she said. "I saw the video, the one you kept hidden on that hard drive you tucked under the floor. I saw you pick me up from that park like I was some forgotten item on a bench. I know who I really am. I know I'm not your daughter." Victor's face darkened, a flicker of something dangerous flashing in his eyes. "Where did you get that file?" Clara said. "I know about Nessa Woodward. I know I'm Amelia, and I'm going to the police." Victor's hand slammed down on the table so hard that the teacup rattled. "No, you're not." Clara pulled out her phone. "Yes, I am, and you can't stop me." She turned on her heel, heading toward her room to pack whatever she could. Before she could take another step, Victor lunged forward and snatched the phone from her hand. "Hey!" she shouted, grabbing for it, but he had already raised it high, and in a single brutal motion hurled it against the wall. The screen exploded on impact, shattering into a spiderweb of black glass. Clara gasped. "Are you insane?" Victor stepped toward her, his voice low and chilling. "You have no idea what you're doing. You think the world's going to welcome you back with open arms? They won't even recognize you." Clara backed away slowly. "That's not your decision." "You're my daughter," he growled. "No," she whispered, trembling. "You stole me." His fists clenched. "You were ours long before you even knew it." Clara turned and fled to her room, slamming the door and locking it behind her. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she backed into the far corner. There was no escape, no window wide enough to climb through, no phone left to call for help. The deadbolt clicked on the other side. He'd locked her in. She was a prisoner. Hours passed in tense silence. She sat on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, listening to the occasional creak of footsteps just outside the door. Every time the floor groaned, she held her breath, fearing Victor would barge in again. Her mouth was dry, her mind racing with what-ifs, each more desperate than the last. Around midnight, the sound of soft rustling reached her ears, followed by a faint scratching at the door. Clara's body froze. She tiptoed toward the door and pressed her ear against the wood. "Clara," a voice whispered. "It's me. Let me in." Clara hesitated, then stepped back as the lock turned with a gentle click. The door creaked open, revealing Elaine, wrapped in her robe, eyes hollow and face pale as snow. She didn't step inside. She just stood there, trembling. "Come with me," she said. Clara blinked. "What?" Quietly, Elaine whispered. "We don't have long. He took something to sleep. It won't last." Clara stepped forward cautiously. "I never wanted this," Elaine murmured. "He said it would be different. He said we'd be a family. But it's been a lie, and I've kept it going. I thought I could make it right by being a good mother. But now I know I never was." Clara's voice broke. "Why now?" Elaine's eyes filled with tears. "Because when I looked at you yesterday, I saw someone I didn't recognize anymore. You're not a little girl who believes our stories. You're a woman now, and he's not going to let you go, Clara." "He's losing control. I'm afraid of what he'll do if you stay." Clara gripped her hand harder. "Where can I go?" "But anywhere is safer than here." She pushed a folded piece of paper into Clara's hand. "There's a police station 2 blocks down. Go now. Don't look back. I'll delay him if I have to." Clara stared at her. "Why are you helping me?" Elaine's voice cracked. "Because I've been wrong for 18 years, and this is the only way I can start making it right." Claire slipped through the building's front door with her shoes in hand, the click of the lock behind her sounding more like the unsealing of a cage than a quiet exit. The narrow street outside was shrouded in shadow, the lamplight diffused by a steady mist that turned the pavement slick beneath her feet. She didn't stop to breathe. She didn't dare. The only sound was the rush of blood in her ears and the rapid thudding of her steps as she turned left, then right, clutching the folded paper Elaine had given her in a death grip. The address of the police station was scrawled in shaking handwriting, but Claire had studied it earlier in the evening when Victor was distracted, tracing the route in her mind. 2 blocks, that was all. Just 2 blocks to freedom, to truth. The mist turned heavier with every breath, curling into her lungs and wrapping around her shoulders like the last tendrils of a life she was about to leave behind. Her coat clung to her arms as her pace increased, fear giving way to urgency. A taxi rolled by slowly across the intersection, its headlights sweeping over her face like a spotlight. She ducked her head and kept moving. When she finally saw the faint blue glow of the police station sign peeking out between stone buildings, she nearly collapsed from relief. She burst through the glass doors, startling the officer at the front desk, her voice cracking as she tried to form coherent words. "Please, I need help," she gasped, reaching into her coat pocket and pulling out the folded poster, then the USB drive containing the restored video and files from the hard drive. The officer, a middle-aged woman with warm eyes and short blonde hair, rose from her chair instantly. "Miss, come with me. You're safe now," she said gently, guiding Clara toward a small interview room down the hall. Clara's limbs shook uncontrollably as she sat down, the weight of the past 3 days catching up to her all at once. The officer took the items with calm precision, plugging the USB into a terminal and opening the first file. Her brows furrowed as she clicked through the contents. Then her eyes widened. "Where did you get these?" she asked, her voice low. Clara swallowed. "Took me," 18 years ago. My name's not Clara. I think I'm Amelia Woodward." The words left her mouth in a whisper, but they thundered in the room like a storm. Within minutes, 2 more officers entered, along with a forensics technician carrying a sealed DNA kit. They spoke to her softly, reassuring her, asking for consent to take a bouquet swab for immediate comparison. Clara nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks as the technician gently swiped the inside of her cheek and sealed the sample. "We'll prioritize this," the officer said. "We have the original Woodward DNA on file from the 2006 investigation. We'll run the match now." Clara sat silently, arms wrapped tightly around herself as she stared at the laminated poster lying on the desk beside her. The picture of Amelia stared back with wide eyes and a hesitant smile, a mirror of her own childhood photos, a face she was finally beginning to accept as her own. An hour passed, maybe 2. Time lost all meaning as she waited, the sterile hum of fluorescent lights gnawing at her thoughts. Her fingers tapped restlessly on her jeans, her lips mouthing the name again and again. Amelia. Amelia. A soft knock broke the silence. The blonde officer returned, her face unreadable, a folder in her hand. She sat down across from Clara and took a breath. "We ran the sample. The results are conclusive. You're Amelia Woodward." Clara's heart leapt and broke at the same time. She stared at the officer, her vision swimming, her breath catching in her throat. "Are you sure?" The officer nodded. 100% match. We've already contacted the family." Clara leaned forward, her face buried in her hands as a sob escaped her lips. For the first time, the weight of her stolen identity began to lift. She wasn't lost anymore. She was found. Before she could gather herself, the door to the station lobby burst open. Voices murmured, hurried footsteps echoed down the corridor, and suddenly a figure appeared at the doorway, disheveled, eyes wide, her breath ragged with disbelief. "Amelia," the woman said, her voice a trembling whisper, barely audible. Clara turned slowly, her gaze locking onto the strangers. A woman with dark hair streaked in silver, her coat soaked from the mist, stood frozen in the frame of the door. Clara stared at her, eyes widening as recognition surged from a place deeper than memory, older than words. It was her, the woman from the photo, the woman with the same eyes. "Nessa," Clara whispered. The woman gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. "Oh my God," she choked out. "It's really you." She rushed forward, arms outstretched, and Clara rose instinctively, colliding into her embrace. The hug crushed the breath from her lungs and filled her with it all at once. The warmth, the scent, the familiarity, it all came back in one overwhelming wave. Nessa clung to her as if afraid she might disappear again. "I never stopped looking," she sobbed. "Not one day. I knew you were alive. I knew you were out there." Clara couldn't speak. She couldn't move. She just held on. She held on with everything she had. Clara sat in the back of the police van as it pulled up to the Edinburgh Remand Center, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, her heartbeat a steady thrum of tension under her ribs. The officers beside her spoke in low voices, their clipped accents blending with the static from the radio, but Clara barely registered any of it. All she could focus on was the cold, gray building ahead and the 2 people inside it who had once been her entire world. Now they were suspects, detainees, kidnappers. The kidnappers. The officers guided her through a series of secure doors, each one opening with a heavy click and closing behind her with a mechanical finality. They led her down a hallway lined with holding rooms, the air sterile and cold. Then she reached the visitor room. The officer paused. "You don't have to speak to them if you're not ready." Clara swallowed hard. "I want to. Just once." The officer nodded and opened the door. She stepped into a small chamber divided by a thick sheet of reinforced glass. On the other side, Victor sat waiting, hands resting on the table, wearing a standard-issue gray jumper. His face looked drawn, older than she'd ever seen it, as if the past 2 days had aged him by decades. But when he looked up and met her eyes, he smiled. "Clara, no, Amelia," he said softly. "You found her, didn't you?" Clara didn't answer. She sat down slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she picked up the phone on her side of the partition. Victor mirrored her, placing the receiver against his ear. "I knew this day would come," he said, voice distant. "I tried to stop it, delay it, pretend it wouldn't matter. But deep down I always knew." "Why?" Clara asked, her voice tight. "Why?" Clara sighed, his gaze far away. "Because I couldn't have children," he said. "Tried, for years. Doctors, treatments, prayers. Nothing worked. And then one day, I saw you. You were alone by a fountain in the park, giggling, chasing a butterfly. Your parents were distracted, talking to another couple. You looked up at me and smiled, and in that moment, I knew God hadn't given me a child, so I took one from heaven." Clara's blood chilled. "You stole me." Victor's jaw tensed. "I gave you a better life. I gave you everything I had." "You gave me lies," she whispered. "You took my mother, my name, my entire history." He leaned forward. "And would you say it wasn't worth it? That we didn't raise you well? That we didn't love you?" Clara bit her lip, her eyes burning. "Love isn't ownership, Victor. It's not theft." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, softly, "You were my angel. You were never supposed to find the ground again." She stared at him, no longer recognizing the man she once called father. She stood up slowly, placing the receiver down with deliberate calm. She didn't look back as the officer escorted her to the next booth. In the adjoining room, Elaine waited. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying, and her posture slouched with exhaustion. As Clara entered, Elaine stood, then sat again quickly, as if unsure what she deserved. Clara took the seat across from her and lifted the phone without waiting for instructions. Elaine mirrored her, hands trembling. "I'm sorry," she said immediately, voice cracking. "I'm so sorry, Amelia." Clara didn't speak at first. She watched her, trying to reconcile the woman behind the glass with the mother who had kissed her scraped knees and tucked her in every night. Elaine wiped her eyes with shaking fingers. "You were the most beautiful thing that ever happened to me. I didn't carry you, I didn't birth you, but I loved you with everything I had." "Then why did you lie?" Clara asked. "Why didn't you tell the truth?" "You had years." "Because I was afraid," Elaine whispered. "Afraid that if you ever knew, you'd run, and I'd lose you forever. I told myself that what we gave you made up for what we took. I told myself that what we gave you made up for what we took. I told myself you'd be better off." Clara swallowed hard. "But you knew it wasn't true." "Every single day," Elaine admitted. "Every time you smiled, every time you said Mom, I felt like a fraud. And still, I held on to you. Because even stolen light still feels warm." Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. She didn't know if they were for what had once felt real. Elaine pressed her hand to the glass. "You don't have to forgive me. I don't expect it. But I want you to know, loving you was wrong." Clara hesitated, her hand hovering just inches from the glass. Her fingers didn't touch it. She couldn't. But she didn't pull away, either. In the weeks that followed, the story of Amelia Woodward's recovery swept through the media like wildfire, capturing the hearts of a world always hungry for miracles. Headlines praised her resilience, podcasts dissected every clue, and social media flooded with comparisons between her childhood photos and the now famous Tower Bridge picture. The public saw it as a triumph, a justice delivered, a wrong finally made right. But for Amelia herself, the journey beyond truth was far more complex. She now lived in a quiet suburb outside London with Nessa and Edric, her biological parents, who had never stopped believing that their daughter was alive somewhere. The reunion was filled with emotion, but also awkward pauses, tentative conversations, and long silences where grief still lingered in the corners of every room. She slept in a room Nessa had once prepared for a toddler, now updated with books and gentle lighting, as if time had paused and then gently resumed. Every morning, Amelia helped Nessa with breakfast, their movements still learning to synchronize after 18 years apart. Edric often lingered in doorways, hesitant but always ready to hug her, to offer help, to relearn fatherhood in a language unfamiliar but deeply felt. One afternoon, Amelia sat by the window sorting through 2 photo albums, one filled with images of the child she had been in Oregon, the other with baby photos of a girl named Amelia, taken in a world she didn't remember. She flipped between the albums slowly, absorbing how two lives had been stitched together into one person. And still, one choice remained: whether or not to pursue full charges against Elaine Jennings. Victor's fate had been sealed the moment police confirmed the kidnapping footage and the DNA results. He had confessed willingly, with no intention of fighting the charges. He would face trial and likely decades in prison, but Elaine, her story was different. She had not been the one to plan the abduction, but she had lived inside the lie, nurtured it, and protected it for nearly 2 decades. And yet she had also been the one to open the door that night, the one who whispered, "Run," when it would have been easier to stay silent. Amelia sat across from her in a quiet visitor room one last time. Elaine looked thinner now, tired, her skin pale under the harsh lights. "You don't owe me anything," Elaine said. "Whatever you decide, I'll accept it." Elaine's voice was steady. "I'm not here for revenge." Elaine blinked. "Then why?" "Because," Amelia said, "you let me go. When it mattered, you chose my freedom over your fear." Tears gathered in Elaine's eyes. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me, even if I didn't deserve you." "You're right," Amelia said gently. "You didn't. But I won't let that define me. I can't live my life chasing peace." She stood, and as she turned to leave, she paused. "Goodbye, Elaine." A week later, Amelia stood behind a podium in front of a small auditorium filled with survivors, families, and support workers. It was the annual UK Missing Persons Conference, and the air was thick with emotion. As the microphone adjusted, she looked out at the sea of faces, each one carrying a version of her story. Some had lost siblings, others children. Some had come back home, some never had the chance. Amelia took a breath, grounding herself in the truth that had once shattered her and now held her steady. 18 years ago, she began. I was taken from my parents during a spring afternoon in Holyrood Park. My name was Amelia Woodward. I didn't know that name again until just a few weeks ago. I lived as someone else, Clara Jennings, in another country, in another world. I was told a story, built a life on a foundation that was never mine. But I was loved, not in the right way, not by the right people, but in a way that confused me, shaped me, made me feel safe even when I wasn't. And I need to acknowledge that, because pretending that love didn't exist makes it easier to hate, but harder to heal. The room was silent, every eye locked on her. I am the child who was stolen, but I'm also the child who was raised in a deeply flawed kind of love. And now I am the woman who has the chance to write her own future. She glanced down at the flyer that had once been stapled to lampposts, held in Nessa's hand, seen by strangers who kept the hope alive. "The day I ran," she continued, "I wasn't just running from fear. I was running toward truth, toward the people who never gave up, toward the version of me that got lost somewhere along the way." Her voice wavered only slightly. "Today, I choose to live fully as Amelia Woodward. But I also honor the part of me that was Clara, the girl who survived, the girl who asked questions, the girl who ran when it counted. I've learned that forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's letting go of the need to stay angry in order to stay strong." She looked up, tears in her eyes, but no longer afraid of them. Every family still waiting, to every child who wonders if they'll ever be found. I see you. I was you. And I believe with all my heart that healing is possible, because I'm standing here today not just as a story of loss, but as proof that even broken beginnings can lead to a whole life. As she stepped back from the podium, the room rose in a wave of quiet, reverent applause, some standing, some wiping their eyes. Nessa reached for her hand as she stepped down, and Amelia held it tightly. For the first time in years, she wasn't running, she wasn't hiding. She was home. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful, true-inspired narratives. I'm curious, what part of Amelia's journey impacted you the most? And where in the world are you watching from? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.